Welcome to Edge of the Rabbit Hole. We have a fantastic show coming up tonight. Civil War Ghosts with author and ghostorian Michelle Hamilton. Coming up next. Welcome to Edge of the Rabbit Hole. We have a fantastic show coming up tonight. Civil War Ghosts with author and ghostorian Michelle Hamilton. All right, a little repeat there, not a problem. Welcome to Edge of the Rabbit Hole. Author and ghostorian Mike Ricksecker. With me, as always, is Vanessa Hogle, my co-host. And down in the chat room, of course, our chat Shananigator, Shana Wankel. And, of course, we have our Cheshire Cats down there as well, Donna Gorton, and I know Bonnie Halperin's usually out there watching. Tonight we have a special treat. Michelle Hamilton is back with us to talk about Civil War Ghosts, which is it's a book that's coming out with Haunted Road Media here. Hopefully by the end of the week. A couple things that we have to tweak here to get it out. But you know, Michelle is she's already written several books. She's a historian, and Michelle, you do a lot of different stuff. So you know, welcome back. We're happy to have you.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here.
So now this book, to me, was really interesting. I actually had a lot of fun putting it together after you sent me the manuscript, and I got kind of a chuckle out of it when you first presented it to me, because Shana and I were doing something a little bit similar with video, in that we were going back through old newspapers just for the Alton area, from the mid 1800s to the early 1900s. But you had specifically carved out the Civil War years, and you know, again with the newspapers, and so I got a nice little chuckle out of that. But yeah, so. What inspired you to? I know you've always been very interested in the Civil War, and you've written, of course, about Lincoln and you know, the Civil War diaries and that stuff. So, what inspired you to go into the newspapers and the ghosts and all that?
Well, kind of based off of my last work, which is Spiritualism during the Lincoln administration, and I was coming across so many fascinating newspaper accounts. America in this time period was very literate. The newspapers were numerous. In fact, many cities would have different newspapers depending on which political party they were. So a small town could have 2 to 3 newspapers, depending on the readership. And I was really fascinated to see, where did some of these stories about hauntings come from? Because there's one topic of kind of contention in the Civil War community, or those who are interested in the Civil War, is when did ghost stories and hauntings start? There are certain people in Gettysburg who will maintain that ghost stories of the city only started within the last 20 years with the Ghost of Gettysburg, Mark Nesbitt's tour, and that this is somehow a modern or a recent creation. And I cite, let's go to the sources, let's go to when the war is going on and see ever they're talking about this topic.
But so, okay, I need to make sure that I didn't have a moment there. You're saying that people in Gettysburg are implying or stating outright that any type of ghost story from that area is recent, that nobody talked about it or discussed any type of haunting from something that happened hundreds of years ago? Recently?
It's been implied on Facebook or on online chat boards that somehow that this is a recent creation, and that it only starts with Mark Nesbitt's Ghost of Gettysburg. And I kind of found that perplexing and curious, because I used to live in California, in San Diego, and one of my neighbors who would actually dog sit my dogs grew up in Gettysburg in the 30s and the 40s. And so I went down and I asked him, and he told me ghost stories. He told me stories that, like, you know, they always knew that Jane Wade House was haunted as a child, that he actually was in Cub Scouts, Boy Scouts, and they would stay in Lee's headquarters, and they would stay up all night because they're hearing footsteps. So this idea that the ghost phenomenon is only a recent phenomenon within the last 30 years, starting in the 90s, I found that questionable, and I wanted to see what was going on during the Civil War period.
Well, thank goodness you did.
Yeah.
That's just baffling to me. I'm just trying to understand where that concept would come from. Is it based in skepticism or cynicism, or is it?
It is, and there's an idea that believe in ghosts or interested in ghosts or a ghost hunter, you were being disrespectful to those who died, that these are American patriots. That were basically grave robbing or being somehow disrespectful to the men and women, Union and Confederate, who died, and somehow this is being disrespectful to American patriots and American veterans.
Let me beg to differ. Let me beg to differ. I actually think that that is preposterous that somebody would come across with those claims, because it's people like Mike, myself, other people that we know in the field who actually try as best as we can to honor the deceased veterans or anybody who has passed on with their story, with what they want to tell us, with what they want to show us. They give us entirely different viewpoints about situations that we've only read about in books, you know. And
yeah, and I wonder how many of these places that without the ghost stories and the hauntings and all that, that we wouldn't know about some of these places, because what would be the interest without them?
Exactly.
It's true that in certain historic institutions across the country, they are supported by the ghost tours, though it's always a double-edged sword, because you want to be able to respect the history and not turn these people into a commercial creation like Betty Crocker or turn into the Haunted Mansion from Disney World. And let's face it, most people who are not interested in the paranormal and have a peripheral interest, all they see is what's presented in the media. So their idea of what a ghost hunter is Ghost Adventures or any other shows on TV. I mean, Ghost Hunters has been off the air for how many years now? Several years now.
Yeah.
So unfortunately, they were the gold standard of how to do a good investigation on a public platform, but that's been replaced by other shows. And so for the average person, unfortunately, Zach Bagans is their gold standard of what a paranormal researcher is.
That actually threw up a little bit in my throat there.
Well, that is actually the most popular ghost hunting show out there right now, the most popular paranormal show. I would say Tennessee Wraith Chasers. They've had several shows now. They're probably at number 2, but ever since Ghost Hunters went off the air, it's been Zach. Unfortunately, we do have a question from the chat from Scotty Fox. He says, perhaps reporting hauntings weren't in social favor then, with a question mark at the end. And
what era?
I guess the era that we were talking about. You guys were talking about Mark Nesbitt at the time. So, but I think if you go back into the research that you did, and kind of what Shana and I were doing, it seemed to be. You're right. It's probably because of the spiritualism movement. I don't know what that ding was. That kind of hurt.
Oh, that's my emails.
Oh, that was your email. Okay, that was a little loud. But it seemed to be very much in favor back then, because they were reporting these ghost sightings as news in the papers quite a bit.
Oh, they were ghost crazy in the 1860s. It's very similar to today. And it's very fascinating is that they're reporting these hauntings, and some of them in my book that I document, they're hoaxes. You can tell they're a hoax, and some of them are questionable, and I'm really intrigued. What did they see? And some of the stories we're seeing the beginnings of legends that are still talked about today in some of these communities. And mainly because of the spiritualist movement, people were open to this idea of ghosts. They were open to seeing ghosts, and they're open to reporting it. And one thing I found was really fascinating was, depending on what political party you were, was how open you were to ghosts. If you're a Democrat, you're a little more skeptical, because the Democratic Party didn't get along with spiritualism. If you're a Republican, Republicans tended to align with spiritualism, and the Republican newspapers were a little bit more sympathetic to the stories of ghosts.
Yeah, go figure that.
Well, yeah, I mean, your previous book directly contradicts whoever these people are saying that this is new. It's a direct contradiction. I mean, spirituality during the Lincoln administration, that was a far cry more than 30 years ago. But I do have to say, in all fairness, I think one of the problems, and as minuscule as it might seem, one of the problems and the reason that we're viewed in this fashion is the term ghost hunters.
Mm-hmm.
That is one of the things that I think plays a part in that.
But it's funny, the term ghost hunter is not new. It did not come up with taps. I'm finding people being in the book, they're being labeled as ghost hunters. And what I was fascinated was how many women in the 1860s were involved in ghost hunting activity or investigations activity more than I expected.
Yeah, I also found that pretty interesting because I knew taps didn't originate the name, nor did the network sci-fi or anything like that. But because Hans Holzer had his book, The Ghost Hunter, which was his first, and so I was already, I know I'd read it somewhere that he was the one that had coined the phrase, but no, people were called ghost hunters, 150 years ago.
I know, it's just always bothered me. It really has. And that could just be...
Well, yeah, because you're not out there hunting a ghost. You're not taking your rifle trying to shoot them. You're not a ghost...
Exactly.
Like, there's a woman that I work with that will say, will call me a ghostbuster, and I'm like, I'm not, no.
No.
So, yeah, I prefer paranormal investigator, but, yeah.
Yes. These were terms that were not coined by the people involved, the people who were actually having the experiences. This is what's being coined by the media.
Right.
And even in the 1860s, the media is the ones that are labeling them as ghost hunters. And the media's job is to sell papers. And their job was to create and keep these stories going, create something that would ensure that they would buy the next issue.
Yeah, I thought some of the terminology was always pretty interesting. Like, instead of saying something like his lordship, like you would say to a person, it was like his ghost ship.
Yeah, his ghost ship, yes. This is definitely not a politically correct book. There's going to be lots of terminology in here that's going to offend, and I think it's right that we should be offended that some of this language is being used, but also I think censoring it out would have been a disservice because we need to see the period in the whole, warts and all.
Oh yeah, there's definitely racist stuff in there, but that's the way they wrote. Yeah.
Basically, the Irish are being insulted, African Americans are being insulted, women are being insulted, unless you're a white Anglo-Saxon Protestant, which is the majority of what the newspaper editors were.
Yeah.
Then you're going to be labeled with something negative.
But that's just the way it was back then, and to act as if it wasn't, like you said, would be a disservice. It would be a lie.
We need to acknowledge the history, warts and all, because without acknowledging it, there's no way that we can stop in our future. We need to acknowledge where we've been and the cycles. Again, history is very, very cyclical. Again, ghosts are popular for a while. Spiritual is popular, then it goes away. Then it becomes popular again, then it goes away. And I'm not sure where we're at right now, whether we're ebbing or about ready to go into another cycle again. It's too hard to tell right now with what network TV is doing, but it's every about 20, 30 years there's a cycle.
Oh yeah, most definitely.
Yeah, I would say network TV is probably on the downtrend because they've hit everything has to be a demon now. There's no other place to go, so it's going to pull back. And we've already seen, shows coming off the air, and so it's kind of run its course now, and going through those death throes, I think, as far as network television. But it'll eventually come back. I'm sorry.
The hidden history shows now are coming in now.
Yeah.
And at least they're not doing the Templars. I was getting so bored with that after a while.
They did the Templars forever.
Oh, the Da Vinci Code. I hate the Da Vinci Code with a passion.
Well, and we also have to look at it this way. Network's taking a hit because now you have Netflix, you have Hulu, you have more freedom to talk about it as all three of us might talk about it, curse words and nastiness and all, which you can't do on regular television. So where it is waning a bit in that direction, it's ebbing, and flowing a little bit better in other directions. So I'm holding out hope for more originality and
well, a little shout out. I wrote and researched this book while listening on my days off, while listening to Inside the Rabbit Hole, other couple of other paranormal podcasts that I listened to while I was researching and compiling my notes and putting everything together.
That's awesome.
Well, thank you.
I put my little headphones on. I had my little laptop. I usually had one of my dogs on my lap, and I would just until my eyes crossed, and then
That's
Nice.
awesome. That's a huge compliment.
Well, it is, and I did want to show a couple of like sample pages from the book, so people can see how it's constructed and what exactly is in there. So that's the cover.
It's a beautiful cover.
Thank
I talk
you.
about Stonewall. I talk about Stonewall too. There are people wondering why Stonewall Jackson's on the cover. They're
Yeah.
talking about seeing his ghost in the middle of the war.
Exactly. Yeah, they're talking about seeing his ghost in the middle of the war. You know, you got a military prison there where, you know, so there's a lot of different things going on here. You got Lincoln and Cleveland. Yeah. So these are all, you know, snippets. Like I said, I had a lot of fun with this, even putting the cover together. If you look at the very top, it's hidden by some of the text. You see one of the papers is called the Union flag, and then going across the other way is the Southern Confederacy. So both sides are represented.
Yeah.
So, you know, inside though, you know, you're getting some different sample clips. So they're all newspaper articles, and Michelle, you could probably, you know, speak to this, of course, since it's your book. But, you know, we threw in, you know, some of the you know, newspaper titles. That's Jeffersonian, and then an actual, you know, clipping from that, which you go into with the actual articles here.
And it looks amazing. I was so impressed when I saw the galleys.
That is a beautiful cover. I love it.
Vanessa's still on the cover.
I am. I love it. I think it's gorgeous.
Thank you. So, and then here's another, you know, historic photo. But yeah, these are all, I mean, they're straight from the newspapers, the actual articles. Whoops. And there's the cover again, since you like that so much. But they're the actual articles that were in the papers. This isn't you just, you know, going through and, you know, grabbing some information from those articles and regurgitating and within your own words. You've actually pulled the news that was reported at that time and have given it to us.
I wanted the documents to speak for itself, because so many times you see in books where they're regurgitating and you read that and go, is that really how it happened? Or they'll I was told years ago in the late 90s that every ghost book out in the market, that the author had to lie and had to exaggerate a story to get published. And I didn't want that to be said about my work.
Awesome.
Well, that makes sense. I mean, nothing could be more perfect than having the actual articles.
And
because there's no fudging.
I want to be in their language, archaic and weird grammar, and again, politically incorrect and insulting, and so I wanted them to speak in their own words.
Yeah, it's clearly not perfect for sure. I mean, people noticed in those couple of clips. I just took screenshots off of Microsoft Word, so there were some, you know, blue lines and stuff within there, and you know that, you know, when Shana and I were doing you know, the Alton video, there's this one article that I'd pulled up, and they had like 3 different spellings for the guy's name, and there were several other words that they had different spellings for. You know, it's the same word, you know, the same last name of the guy. They gave him 2 different first names. It was, what in the world is going on with this article? So I had to find other articles to make sure that I was saying the guy's right name and everything. But it's like, were there no editors back then?
Well, no, there was no editors. A lot of times the editor is going to be the publisher and the printer, and again, like, there's always going to be a time deadline. Mm-hmm. Also, standardization of grammar had not really caught on yet. Also, there was the dictionary, there was Webster's dictionary, but people really weren't following it to a certain degree. And also, we're seeing standard American English versus British English. And also at this time period, they love to throw in French words because it sounds exotic, and and so it's usually going to be very bad French words, a very bad spelling, a lot of phonetic spelling.
Nice.
True. Well, they also had, if memory serves, when it during about that time frame, they had particular letters that were supposed to be one thing but were actually another. But they had to use that typeface for it because there was conflict or something with how to actually form the letter. It was like between an S and an F or something like that, where they were so very similar that when they were going through the typeface, they would get it wrong.
Well, there's also the double S in colonial 18th century, where they would put it as, and it looks like two F's put together,
Yeah.
and that's a holdover from the 18th century.
Yeah.
Well, also depends on some of the ages of these editors. If you're having an editor who is 65 years old in 1860, when did he learn to read or write?
Right.
The early 1800s.
Yep,
Also,
exactly right.
Presents shortages. So the North is always going to be more industrial. The South is always going to be a little bit behind. And during the Civil War, with the embargoes and the blockades, the South's going to have a very difficult time to get new products. So, like in the city of Vicksburg during the during the blockade of the city of Vicksburg, they were printing their last newspapers on the backs of wallpaper.
Wow.
Because
Interesting.
paper. And so you flip it over and it's wallpaper, and then the back is the newsprint, and it was a one sheet.
Interesting. Now, did you find anything thematic between North and South?
North will be, again, a little bit more sympathetic. South will be definitely a lot more skeptical. And that's just, then that falls on the Republican-Democrat split.
Okay.
Between the two, who had what you would consider the most profound experiences published in regards to paranormal activity?
What the soldiers were seeing during the war, what they're seeing at hospitals. What would happen is in areas like on West Virginia area, it's a border territory. West Virginia actually splits away from the state of Virginia. So we have areas where one day, it's a Confederate hospital, and then the Union soldiers will move in, and when they're there overnight, they're having problems at the sites. In fact, there was talking about several letters home where they're published in the newspapers again, that so-and-so had a difficult time sleeping in this room, or we were woken up in the middle of the night. We thought it was the enemies coming to attack us. And it was just our guys claiming that they saw a ghost over in the hospital room.
So were there actually testimonies, or in these letters, were there actually conflicts between deceased and living Union and Confederate soldiers?
Yes, that's what they're saying. That is
amazing.
And there's one from Boston. It was a Civil War prison, and there's reports that there have been Confederate soldiers who have passed, likely from disease, and the Union guards are complaining that they're having problems, or that they're seeing things that are shocking or scary to them. So this is what they are saying.
And for them to be frightened when they're in war and basically having to live daily not frightened, but something that the standard person can't see is actually scaring them, that actually says something.
Mm-hmm. They're seeing something out of their comfort zone that is spooking them.
Wow.
Hey, we have a $10 super chat from Tom McNicholas. He says, "Thank goodness the South had the moonshine." Nice.
True
I
story.
think Tom is probably wanting some moonshine to keep him warm tonight. He's up there in the Chicago area. That's negative 50 stuff. No. Can't be doing that.
Wow.
Yeah. So, Michelle, I noticed also throughout this that you did include some articles from some places that you wouldn't necessarily expect, like Hawaii.
Yes, Hawaii. Then the Sandwich Islands.
Right.
That one was a great story where a woman is in San Francisco. Her husband, she has gone to San Francisco, which is in California, to receive medical treatment. She's ill, so she goes to San Francisco with her young son. He's about 10 years old, and her husband is supposed to join her, or is going to come with her, and during the middle of the night they wake up and they see him, and they're all happy that he has come and joined them. And morning comes, and the husband is not there, and the son and the wife are very confused. They're at a hotel. No one has checked in to their suite, and within the day, she receives a letter that her husband has passed away from illness in Hawaii.
Oh, that's so sad.
So we're considered maybe a crisis apparition, or a time of death apparition.
Right.
That's actually more common than you think. My
A lot of people report that.
Passed away. Yeah, he passed away in a fire. Ooh. And that was in Wisconsin. And my ex-husband, his mother, and his sister were in Wichita, Kansas. It was 2 days before Christmas. And many moons ago, almost 40 years ago. And that night, the entire house filled with the smell of smoke. And they didn't know why. And they get the phone call the next day.
Wow.
So he was a fireman.
Oh.
So, I mean, that actually happens more than you think, but to have it written down so long ago as something that's just, and that they felt comfortable writing that's amazing. Kind of makes you want to cry.
Yeah, that's sad.
The spiritual movement at this time period, spirits are appearing nightly in parlors all across the country. So this was seen as an age of wonder. When the telegraph first came out in 1848, again, we're talking through instantaneously through the internet. That would have been seen as akin to almost, magical, mystical in this time period. And in fact, when the telegraph first came out, people were doubting that it was even real, that you could talk. A person from Baltimore could talk to somebody in Washington, D.C. and ask them how the weather was. That was as something divine. And there was the government. There was members of Congress who wanted to go. They went to the House of Representatives and said, "Let us get money, subsidize money, and see if we can talk to heaven through the telegraph. Let us talk to heaven. If we can talk through the air, surely we can talk to heaven and talk to the angels and talk to God and talk to the spirits. And that this is something that the American government should invest their tax money into investigating." Of course, he was ridiculed off the floor, but this is an idea that anything was possible.
It's something that we take for granted now.
Oh, yeah.
Wow.
Absolutely. I mean, with cell phones these days, I mean, we have no clue as to how, really that was magical for them back then. Michelle, we do have a question from the chat. This is from Eric Jobs. What sources did you use for your information?
The newspapers, all peer newspapers. Library of Congress is a wonderful repertory of newspapers from 1789 to the early 2000s, and I went through there. I did a search, and I looked for ghost, I looked for medium, I looked for spiritualism, and I would go through. I had to weed through a lot of references to Hamlet, a lot of references to the Holy Spirit and the Holy Ghost. There'd be some days where I would be listening to on the road media. Click. Why am I doing this? Why did I decide to do this? And I find something really good. I find the story about the Hawaiian Islands, or I'd find the story, my favorite story.
What is your favorite story? Yeah.
My favorite story. This is so absolutely comical. It's in Ohio. At this time period, people would prank each other by dressing up as a ghost. You would put a sheet over yourself and try to scare your neighbors. Fun for all. And this is either real or it was a prank. This ghost, like an apparition, knocks on a door. A little old lady answers it, and in the middle of the night, she's in her nightgown. Of course, she screams, and her adult son comes out, and he's in his nightgown, and it's cold, and like January. And he sees this ghost ship, as they call him, and he goes chasing after this ghost ship. So he's running through the street in the middle of the night in his nightgown, and the ghost runs to the local funeral home that they would call it, the undertaker's, and he disappears through the undertaker's door. So the adult son goes to confront the Undertaker. He's pounding on the door, and the Undertaker comes out because at this time period you lived at your business. The Undertaker's in his nightgown, and they present to have a very vocal argument over the ghost that ran into through the door, and their blows happen, and the adult son actually punches out the Undertaker. So the adult son is arrested, and it goes to jail. And so the next morning, when they go in front of the judge, the Undertaker wanted to have the adult son be charged for slander. And the judge threw the case out, saying that nobody would be creating a slander suit on purpose in their nightgown in the street in the middle of the night.
Right.
He saw something, and this is something when you're in your nightgown in the middle of the night. This is something that was not planned.
Exactly. Real quick, we have a $5 super chat from Charla Kane. Thank you very much, Charla. Absolutely appreciate that. It's a $5 super chat there. She's a super chat superstar. Something that I did notice was that there seemed to be certain areas that seemed to be reporting a lot of activity, or there was a big to-do going on around a particular ghost case, for lack of a better term. You kept getting these different articles and different reports, and you'd have them circulate around the country. Like Ohio seemed to have a lot. You had the Jersey City ghost, and so did you find that there were certain areas like that were just really high with these reports?
I did. Again, New Jersey's a lot. And New Jersey's right outside New York. New York had a large spirituals population. Ohio also had a large spirituals population of community. But you would see waves or flaps would go on. That's what I was fascinated, where there would be a story that would go on for several weeks, and then it would die down. But it was, you would see these patterns where there would be a story, and then they would go national. That's what I was fascinated, because again, I was able to access the Library of Congress, and so I'm able to get when am I searching, I was able to get I could get other newspapers, and you see where they're cross-referencing. And sometimes I would get one newspaper that covered the story better than another, or one outside the area would provide more information.
Now we've talked about the hauntings between the Union and the Confederate soldiers and everything, and how they interacted. Were you able to come across any stories of deceased slaves and any possible hauntings with them?
No, not really. There'd be an occasional reference, and you would see that more in the spiritualist tracks right before the war started. And so you have to understand, Uncle Tom's Cabin comes out. That was the #1 bestseller. That was the Da Vinci Code, Harry Potter of the time period, of selling mass numbers. That was the runaway bestseller. No one has seen a book be that insanely popular. And so you would see the copycats would start coming out, and so they would start in the South, they started producing novels of, here's from our side, it's not that bad. And to support it, they would start having in spiritualist tracts and in newspapers of the stories of the happy slaves,
Yeah, no, it was that bad.
Yeah, and so those stories you have to take with a grain of salt. You have to know where they're coming from. They're coming from a very pro-slave storyline, and so anytime when you get those stories, you have to be very careful as an historian not to accept it at face value, and understand the political context in which they're coming out of.
Mm-hmm. That makes sense. That makes a lot of sense. I've just found being in those areas, whether it's the South, right there around Virginia, West Virginia, that the activity that I've had with the deceased soldiers from the Civil War, it was quite extensive, but it was also extensive with the slaves who had passed. And so they might not have just wanted to give them newspaper time. And how sad is that, that even upon their death, they couldn't receive any type of credit or even notice, for lack of a better word. So that's very troubling.
Well, it's a sad reflection of the times that we're like, I'm surprised at how many female ghost hunters were getting credit. Or how many female, actually, there's a lot of stories where when people were dressing up as a ghost and trying to scare the neighbors, the guys did not come out very well in the story. The girls were the ones who were either pulling off the sheets, or actually one time there's one that she cold cocked one of the guys.
Good for her.
The girls, and her comment basically was, "I ain't afraid of no ghost." Basically is what she said. I mean, so Ghostbusters needs to give her some credit for coining that term.
There you go. Hey, we have a $5 super chat from Rolf Pfeiffer Mueller. Vielen Dank, Rolf. Absolutely appreciate that. And we also have a question from Judy from Judy Wilson. She has a question. Are there any hauntings going on now that you wrote about?
You see some that are the beginnings of the story. That there's some areas where I mentioned in my notes, like this area is still haunted today, but I really didn't see as much as the origin stories as I was kind of looking for. I was seeing, little flaps would go on. But there's some areas that, they still say, okay, this area is haunted, but not as many as I thought I was going to find.
Yeah, I think there were a couple that may have ended up like local legends, like the Erie Street Cemetery in Cleveland, which is now East 9th Street. That's still a local legend out there, and I only know that because I'm from Cleveland, but. Yeah, and that was another one where it seemed like they were chasing a guy in a sheet.
And also a lot of the locations that I'm covering in the book may not be around anymore.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of these farmhouses. A lot of things were happening on farmhouses, and those buildings may not be there anymore, and whatever issues may have already been resolved.
Sure enough. So, let's see if we have any other questions going on right now.
I've seen a few in there.
Yeah, there are a few, and I haven't been as good with the keeping up with the chat, but to me, just the whole, condensing it down to those 5 years, and you also included after the Civil War ended, so you get to see like a little bit of that activity of kind of the fallout from the war within some of the articles that you included.
I decided to go all the way to the calendar end of 65 because, the Civil War really does not end on April 9th, 1865, like historians like to say. You watch Ken Burns' The Civil War, it ends on the 9th of April. It's still going on until summer of 65, until you have every Confederate army has surrendered. And in fact, there was one army that did not surrender, General Silby. He went into Mexico. So until every army has left the field, the war is still going on. So I also want to show the after effects of Lincoln's assassination, which was traumatic. It traumatized the nation. In fact, what was interesting is, go on the newspapers and you look anything past April 14th, 1865, for the whole month into May and June, there's black borders on the newspapers.
Oh, wow.
Wow.
Yeah, now, I know that's something that, Lincoln seems to be something that, or somebody that's pretty close to you. You covered the spiritualism in the Lincoln White House. You worked at one of the Lincoln houses before, right? If I'm not mistaken. No,
I visited there, but I've never.
Maybe that's where I caught on to you visited there. Okay.
I work at the Mary Washington house,
right?
And that's George's mama.
Right. So I guess my question was, from everything that you've written about with spiritualism, with the Lincoln presidency, and now you're covering the ghost stories reported at the time, how much did those two really play into each other once he was assassinated?
It plays into it that, if I understand your question correctly, it just so traumatized the nation, and I think it's interesting now we have stories about Lincoln's ghost, and maybe that's something I'll cover more in a later book, is the stories of how Lincoln is supposed to be still seen all across at several locations. I think it's just the whole national trauma that the country went through for the 5 years of the war.
Yeah, you were coming right out of the war, and all of a sudden he's gone. So
it was. I mean, there had never been a president assassinated. There had been attempts. There had been very poor attempts. Andrew Jackson is the first president to have assassination attempts. Actually, he had 2 attempts. One of them when he was coming to Fredericksburg to dedicate the Mary Washington Monument. He had a person try to hit him over the head with their cane when he is on a steamboat coming up the Potomac River to come to Fredericksburg. And then he had another more famous attempt at the Capitol. So there have been half-hearted attempts, not really serious attempts. And then Lincoln is shot in the back of the head while he's holding his wife's hand at a theater. When the war is over, when the day he says to his wife, Mary, this day I believe the war is now over. Let us be more happy. Let us look forward to the future. Let us look forward to where we're going to go after 1868, when my final year in office is done. And then we have this traumatic event where he is taken away. Some historians have written about how Union troops basically felt that their joy of the war ending was robbed from them.
Yeah. I can imagine that. We have a question here from Katie Hopkins. What kind of research did you find during the Reconstruction era?
I didn't cover Reconstruction as much. Frankly, I kind of find Reconstruction to be very depressing. It's very hard to cover. So I stop it in 65, and in the Reconstruction, the very early months of Reconstruction, you're seeing things going on in the North. That's when we have the Jersey City ghosts going on. You're not seeing anything yet in the South. Everything is just too raw, too damaged in the South to even start talking about hauntings yet.
Yeah, it was a lot of the Jersey City ghosts. There were some references there to Jefferson Davis and in the different prisons.
He's being haunted by the damage that he's causing.
Right.
So that is about as much as they're going to go. I find it's interesting that they're not blaming Lee. They're not blaming the generals. Jefferson Davis is going to be the one that's going to be punished. They're speculating that he is obviously going to go crazy, that it will be haunted so much by the dead that will be his just punishment, that he will go crazy.
Now, let me ask you, with all of the research that you did and all of the different newspaper articles and everything that you came across, do you believe that all of these are what we would consider valid hauntings, or could some of it be, mob mentality in the paranormal, kind of jumping on that paranormal coattail and running with it?
It's a mixture of both. There are definitely ones where you're looking like, okay, that's a hoax, that's a guy in a sheet. There's some of them going, I don't know what's going on. There's one farmhouse that they're having poltergeist activity. What we would label poltergeist activity. Today, they would probably be on ghost hunters. It would, please help us. We're having things happen, and then there's some that are definitely, again, there's hoaxes and there's real things going on that I would have loved to have been there and see what was going on, to go be an investigator to see really what was going on at these properties.
Did they have any, for lack of a better word, scientific ways of investigating where they tried to debunk any of this activity, or did they just take it at face value?
They're starting to do some scientific. You have to be in an urban center that has a scientific population. You have to be in a New York, a Boston, a Washington, D.C. In fact, I talk about it in my book on spiritualism, that Lincoln got the head of the Smithsonian Institution involved when there was a bad psychic, his air quote psychic. His name was Lord Colchester. He was neither a Lord nor British, and he is profiting from Mary and her grief, and he was about the only medium that got close to the Lincolns in this period that we would label as fraudulent, and he was trying to cheat Mary in her grief, and they caught him in the process of doing it. There is this great little dragnet between the head of the Smithsonian and Noah Brooks, who is a newspaper reporter and a close friend of the Lincolns, and they're chasing him, and they're exposing him in the middle of a seance as being fake, and they pull him to the White House because Colchester threatens to blackmail Mary. And Noah Brooks calls him to the White House and says, basically, get out of Dodge. Go down the train station, get on the train, and go. If not, if you're here tomorrow, you're going to end up in Old Capitol Prison.
Oh, wow. Wow. So they didn't take everything as faith yet.
And then, so he went on, and then later on in the late 1860s in Boston, he'll actually be brought to court for being a fake medium. So the Colchester, he's fun. That may be something I'll cover in another topic. That in the late 1860s, mediums are actually being brought to trial and being sued. They usually weren't convicted, but they are being brought to trial for being false. We have P.T. Barnum helps lead charges against William Mumler, the spirit photographer, because P.T. Barnum's basically was quoted as saying, hey, I cheat people out of their money, but they know they're being cheated. It's all for good fun. And Mumler is cheating people who are hurting, who are mourning, and are giving them false goods and are taking their money and making them believe that this is real. And so P.T. Barnum saw that as if you're going to cheat them, at least be wink wink, be in with it with the people.
Yeah, but you had a lot of people coming forward on Mumler's behalf saying, but these photos are helping us give us closure. So
but that begs the question, real closure or false closure?
It was probably false closure, yeah.
Yeah. Is it better to give a soft lie or a hard truth?
And one of the people Mumler photographed was the last photograph of Mary Lincoln.
Yep.
And you see her in that photograph is 1871, 1872, and she is looking awful. Her health is going down. She is having diabetes. She will actually have eye problems because she cried so much she damaged her corneas permanently.
Oh, bless her. Oh. Well, she went through a lot, the poor woman.
Yeah. We always discount him. She was holding her husband's hand when he was shot.
Well, she also
lost a child.
She
had been through a lot.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, give her a
Lincoln
break.
Was her last thing, holding on to,
He was kicked out of the room when Lincoln died. She was not allowed to be in the room because people thought her crying was too annoying. But there's actually her cloak has survived, and there's blood patterns on it that some historians say is her husband's.
Wow. Judy Wilson is wondering if there have been any sightings of Mary Todd Lincoln.
There have been, and this is something I would like to go down in another project. She has been seen in Springfield, Illinois. There's been some reports, and again, I always try very carefully with this because I respect the National Park Service. I respect the fact that the Lincoln home is under the National Park Service, and they have a no-ghost policy. But there have been some reports that Mary has been seen at the Springfield home.
I wonder if the ghosts adhere to that no-ghost policy.
I was getting ready to ask that exact question.
I'm sure they look at the signs and go like, oh dang it, I can't haunt here. It doesn't look good.
It's a no haunting zone. Can't have it.
Dude, they said we can't come here. I don't think they do that.
They're like, Gettysburg, man, I can't haunt here. I can go over to the KFC across the street, but I can't haunt over here.
Right.
You know what I picture is a ghost standing 5 feet away from the sign going, ha ha, ha ha, can't get me here. Ha. Yeah, I would do that shit. That would be me. All right, I'd be like, oh, tell me I can't.
Oh, I know. I'd be moving stuff around on them, like playing with their hair or something. Yeah.
And there are stories from past employees that things have happened, that they have seen things move in the Lincoln home. That Mary has helped them on redecorating. There's one story I remember reading this years and years ago that Mary is wanting the employee there, or assume as a ranger or interpreter, was wanting to move something around, and Mary kept moving it back. That kind of the silly stuff of.
Good for her.
Nice.
Good for her.
Hey, Vanessa, in the chat, Kelly McCarville says, Vanessa, when we die, that is totally where we are going.
Oh, hell yeah. Oh, I will stand next to the sign with my finger hovering an inch above it and go, I'm not touching it. I'm not touching it. I'm not touching it. I'm not touching it. And I will say it so fucking loud that whoever put the sign up is going to hear it. And that's all they're going to hear, because I'm a bitch. It's what I do.
It's what you do.
Oh, bless them.
Yep.
I find that fascinating, though. And it's just the way that you're recounting the history, and even in regards to spirits, how there was still so much segregation and racism as not telling certain stories that we know were going on, but they didn't deem them important enough. And how soldiers on the field who saw unspeakable things on the daily would be frightened by an apparition and possible communication. I find that fascinating. And anyone that says that it might be disrespectful to do something like this or to talk about it, shame on them. Yeah. Because bless you for actually putting the work in and the time in to give these people voices and to let everybody today know what they went through then. And I highly commend that.
Well, thank you.
You're very welcome. I couldn't do it. I couldn't do that fucking research. No way.
Yeah, that would have to be a lot of work for sure.
That's a lot of work.
Michelle, do you?
This book is kind of special to me. It kept my sanity alive. Last year was not a good year for me on a personal level. My aunt passed away on Mother's Day. We walked in and found her deceased, and then my dog Pearl, that was my first dog. She at 15 decided to go home to Rainbow Bridge and passed very suddenly.
Wow.
Oh, I'm so sorry, Hen.
Well, that's a testament to you that you're able to get all that research done and get this book out. So.
Absolutely.
Yeah, very sorry for your losses. Sharon is wondering, did anyone talk about the fear Southern civilians felt during the war?
No, not so much about Southern civilians. Ever we're seeing any active, what we would term Civil War ghosts, is going to be more of soldiers. The civilian experience is not being covered yet. That I have a feeling will come later. We're seeing that definitely now in today's paranormal world, where there is an equal balance. We're talking about soldiers. We talk about the African American slaves. We talk about the Gettysburg. We talk a lot about the ghosts or the residual leftovers of the civilians. We're not seeing that yet during the war.
Do you think more of the sightings that we see these days in regards to Civil War ghost sightings are more the residual type, like when we see the soldiers in the field and then suddenly disappear and that sort of thing?
I think there's a mixture. I definitely think some stories definitely have a residual quality to it. When you're seeing a full regiment of 50 to 100, a regiment, that's what their numbers were. Company was about 50 to 100. So when you're seeing people who said they've been out on, let's say for Gettysburg, they've driven and they've seen the company come by. That's probably residual. Now, when you go to some, there's definitely also, I've heard, active intelligent spirits still on the battlefield. Or when you go to a place like the Jenny Wade House, it's very intelligent.
Sailor's Creek, where I was at, very intelligent. Full regimen would not shut up. I mean, they laid everything out on the line. Even told me battle plans.
Oh, wow.
Even told me where they were supposed to come in from and didn't. I mean, and all of that was able to be verified, which was amazing. But no, you're absolutely right. You know, but I also think, and let me know your viewpoint on this, and you as well, Mike. I think that some can appear residual to those who can see spirits but haven't quite learned how to communicate with them yet. And I think for those that can communicate with them, that residual actually turns into an intelligent. Now, I've actually never stated this on live TV before, but I'm going to now. I really do think that might be the case.
And that could be. I'm not in the gifted area to be able to see spirits. I mean, every once in a while, I work in a museum. Every once in a while, something will move, and I'll just stand over the object and say, you better be picking that up. I have those days, and I'm in 2 petticoats, and I'm out of weight, and I don't want to go over anyway. So you better be picking that up.
That's awesome.
That's my day to day. That's my day to day life. Or I'm in my office and I'm hearing footsteps. Okay, hello, good morning. The vacuum cleaner's in the closet. You can use it if you wanted to. That's my daily life.
Wow.
Hey, we have a comment here from Katie Hopkins. She says, Michelle, I would love to co-author a book with you. I think we could do some great research. I mean, I will just come out east for a while and we can do it if that could work.
Bring the baby.
Bring the baby. There
Ain't
you go.
he precious?
Oh, yeah, he's adorable.
He is. She's bringing him to Paracon.
There we go. Well, I know we were mothering her during Paracon.
Oh, yeah. I get to have baby cuddles. Yeah.
Sure,
Yeah.
I'd love to talk to you.
Yeah, for those viewers that don't know, we're talking about the Haunted Road Media Paracon, which is this June 1st. So Michelle is going to be there. And the book will be available, definitely available at that time. We are going to have it out here in the next couple of days. So those watching after the fact, a couple days from now, you'll find the link to the book in the description. Of course, we don't have it out there right now because, like I said, a couple little things we have to finish up, and they'll be released hopefully by the end of this week. So,
yeah.
That was horrible. That was awful. I'm so sorry.
Michelle's excited. Well, originally we were trying to have it out by Christmas time, but because I got that manuscript from Michelle, and I'm like, there's a lot I could do with this. So I started getting very creative with it, and so it took extra time.
Well, you're teaching me patience, and that's a good thing because I'm very impatient.
Okay.
So it's always a good thing. I'm so impatient. I wanted to come at 6 months. I came 6 weeks early, so I'm a very impatient person.
Okay. Well, I appreciate your patience then. And for the others like Chuck Banks and Katie Hopkins, because I know you guys have things to me, and it's kind of been I've been working on Michelle's.
And in that regard, y'all, Mike and I were talking before the show. I am putting off mine for another month so he can get some type of breather in between publishing books. So give Rebel Witch a memoir another month. Why?
Because it's not like he has like a daily job that.
Exactly.
No. I don't do anything else. I don't do anything else. Yeah.
We know how busy Mike is, and I don't want his head to explode.
Oh, it already has. This is a pieced together mess here,
Well, we don't
crazy
want to be
gluing.
on Shauna's bad side.
Yeah.
Because she scares me a little bit.
There you go. So, Michelle, anything else you want people to know about the book here before we wrap up, because we're getting right down to the end here?
If they want to find a fun, different take on ghost story in the Civil War, that's going to be in my book, and so I think readers will enjoy it, and I'm really looking forward to bring it out.
Yeah, I think it's a really, really different look at the Civil War and that era that people don't usually get a chance to see. It's a rare opportunity that we actually get to sit down and read those articles, read the writing of the time. Even in like documentary series, we'll just see like a headline maybe or a little clip, quickly come up on the screen, and now here it is. You can actually sit down and read those articles, which is very, very cool. So, where can people find you, Michelle?
That people can find me on Facebook, Michelle L. Hamilton, author. I have an author's page. And also I do have a blog. I need to be more faithful on updating it. It's michellelhamilton.net. But I'm on Facebook.
All right. Very cool. And you can find her books at, this book will be coming out on hauntedroadmedia.com. And she's also in, I think, Encounters 2, 3, and 4? Encounters with the Paranormal?
2, 3, and 4. Okay. And also, if anyone's in the Fredericksburg area, please come visit the Mary Washington House, the Rising Sun Tavern, and the Humorous Apothecary Shop.
As soon as I can.
Yeah, I've been wanting to stop by there, so it'll happen one of these days.
It's a fun year for the Mary Washington House. We're having some new information coming out later this year. Help us piece more of the story together of how when the house is built, and so I'm really excited to be working on that project.
Oh, very cool. Very cool. Awesome. Okay, let's go ahead and get to the Super Chat Superstars. We had Tom McNicholas, Charlie Kane, and Rolf Pfeiffer Mueller. Thank you all very much for your Super Chats tonight. Super Chat Superstars. All right. So, also want to thank Shana, our chat Shananigator, for shenanigating the chat. Absolutely appreciate it as always. We'll get to the shout-outs here. So Jill Nenchinsky, Sharon Lane, Judy Wilson, thank you all very much. Donna Gorton, of course, our Cheshire Cat, also handling some stuff down there in the chat right now. Judy Wilson, I already said Judy Wilson, but you get another shout-out. There you go. Candy Orton is down there. Greg Rinkin, thank you very much. Bree Jones, thanks for joining us again. The Hagelin, thank you. Tammy Heitzman, stay warm. All of those in like those northern states like Wisconsin, like that. I know Betty Lange was in here earlier. Keep warm, please.
Be safe.
Yeah, be safe. Denise Pridemore, thank you very much for joining us, and again, condolences. Katie Hopkins, thanks for joining us. Debbie 08, thank you once again. There's Joe Chandler, one of our Super Chat Superstars. So, not Super Chat Superstars, Deep Down the Rabbit Hole Patreon patron. So, we have a Patreon, patreon.com/hauntedroadmedia. And our top tier there, the Deep Down the Rabbit Hole Patreon patrons, Tom McNicholas, B3 Aerospace, Zippy Davis, Pamela Queen, Andrew Cox, and Joe Chandler. Thank you all very, very much for that. There's Shay Carroll. Thanks for joining us once again. There's B3 Aerospace. There's Tim Schoen. Thank you very much. Real Paranormal Activity of the podcast. Thanks for joining us again. Let's see. We also have Scotty Fox. Thanks for joining us tonight. Appreciate that. Kelly McCarville is in the house as well. And let's see who else we have. We have quite a few people in the chat tonight. There's Shadowcat. Thanks for joining us. And let's see. I already got Tom, of course. And all right, I'm going to go ahead and scroll back down. Jeebus the Gamer Nerd, I know, was in here really early. All right. So last second shout outs if you guys want them. And then we're going to go to Inside the Upside Down. We're going to talk about different types of hauntings. There's Melissa Nicholson. Thanks for joining us again. EQ, thank you as well. Granny Vapes. Awesome. There's Pat Kraft. And I know Adam Tiller's probably lurking out there and watching Oak Island at the same time. There's Nichelle Thompson. And all right. I think that's probably going to be about it. Oh, yeah, Diane Hilbert. Fairy Queen, Diane Hilbert. Yep. There you are, Diane. I should just always automatically say Diane. I know she's out there. So, okay. And, all right. So, we'll go ahead and get to Inside the Upside Down here. Just a few minutes. Michelle, thank you once again. I had a lot of time working on your book, and I can just imagine, all the research you had to put into that. So wonderful work.
Thank you.
So, all right, Vanessa, another great week.
Yeah, always.
All right. We'll see everybody soon.
Bye, y'all.